Hello. Today I'm gonna walk you through the books I've read over the last 6 months. I have a list. The very first book I read in 2025 kind of set the tone for the rest of the year, or at least for the next maybe 4 months of 2025, which is Dracula by Bram Stoker, a gothic classic. As it turns out, I'm kind of obsessed with the gothic. I had mixed feelings about it because, on one hand, I really liked it, but then on the other hand, I found it really boring. What I liked about it was all of the friendships that they had. What I didn't like about it was that I kind of found myself wishing it was over, like wishing it would just pick up the pace a little bit. I really like the Victorian vibes, of course. I think I prefer Carmilla because I found it more engaging. If you are into like vampires and you want to read Dracula and Carmilla, and like you're aware of the fact that Carmilla actually was the first book that inspired Dracula, and you're into like classic English literature, then I would definitely recommend reading both and seeing what you think, because I found Carmilla way better. The next book I read was The Alice Network. This was one of those, historical novels with the woman on the cover. You know those covers that have like the woman in a trench coat walking away from the shot. Very just kind of, I want to say pulpy, but also it's kind of pulpy, but like in a good way. Soap opera, but like also really serious. Uh, based on real life events. So the Alice Network actually took place in World War One. It was an actual like network of spies in France. That was really fun to learn about. I kind of remember being annoyed at the main character because she's slightly not like other girls. Like she does maths in her head. Like she's really into math, and she just is like, yeah, people are not like math. Like math is easy, but people are not easy. And I was just like kind of cringing. I also found the lack of like historical fashion. Like if you didn't know you were in World War One, there was really nothing to tell you. Like there was not much world building. Like I know that it's the real world, so you don't really have to build, I guess. But in my opinion, like a historical novel should have like world building as well. Something to tell you that you're in that era. I couldn't tell that we were in World War One when those pieces were happening. I think the present day parts were way more clear. So because the book follows the World War One and then the present day, which is like late 40s, the late 40s vibes were very present, but the World War One vibes were not. I really liked the relationship with the women of the main characters, like the spies. I really liked the sacrifices that the women like went through. You could really tell that it was really messed up what they went through, and I really felt for them. Okay, next is The Romance of the Forest, my old friend. And if you watched my previous video, your old friend as well. Romance of the Forest by Anne Radcliffe is one of the classics of the Gothic genre, the 18th century Gothic genre. It is simply iconic. I'm really excited to read other Anne Radcliffe stuff. I feel like as a Gothic connoisseur, I must read more of Anne Radcliffe stuff. A lot of the plot takes place in nature, so you get a lot of like very Disney-esque descriptions of nature. And because Anne Radcliffe kind of looks at nature as if it's God, like she ascribes godlike characteristics to nature, you really feel safe in her descriptions of nature, and I found that really cozy and comforting, but also really thrilling because it is a Gothic novel. So obviously I was rooting for Adeline to escape whatever she was going through. I was really like scared for what's gonna happen to her. One of the highlights of the year for me, for sure. I think this book kind of changed a lot for me, definitely. Next is The Castle of Otranto. The Castle of Otranto, like I mentioned in my previous video, it is the first Gothic novel to be written in 1760s. Kind of legendary, kind of iconic, fever dream like it follows like a scramble for power in a power vacuum, kind of, for the Castle of Otranto, so to secure the castle within one specific family. And I found it interesting because it is the first gothic novel, but I also found it really haphazard and at times difficult to follow. Like, to be honest with you, the ending is kind of all over the place for me. I really liked certain moments with the main character, or like one of the main characters. They're all main characters, honestly. Theodore and Matilda. I was really rooting for the character called Isabella, the one that was escaping the like predatory stepfather figure. Don't really have a lot to say about this one because it is just, it kind of speaks for itself. Honestly, I feel like most people that have read it have a similar opinion, other than the fact that I feel like for me, because I'm kind of a sensitive reader, I really just feel everything the author is trying to tell me. And if I don't feel what they're trying to tell me, then that means they're doing a really shit job. So I felt really scared listening to this audiobook. And I feel like most people kind of just laugh or find it funny. And I definitely found it funny at times, but I also found it quite terrifying at other times. Okay, next I read probably so far my favorite book that I read this entire year, which is really upsetting because I read it in January, which means that I haven't really read any other like outstanding books this year, which is kind of upsetting. And it's July. Stoner by John Williams. Amazing. I mean, look at how depressed he is. He is so sad. And the book is quite sad because it follows a professor. It is considered a campus novel, so that means a novel that takes place in a university and pretty much only in a university. This novel follows a stoner, that's his last name. He grows up on a farm and then he goes to this university and he becomes a English professor, like of English literature, and it follows his life. And what I really loved about this book is how it highlights the mediocrity of life and makes it okay. It normalizes just like a normal life with its ups and downs. It doesn't explain a lot at all, so some of the characters have left me just kind of feeling flabbergasted because I was like, what are you doing? I didn't understand a lot of the motivations for some of the characters. For example, his wife. I found the book really sad, but also really inspiring. It is a little existentialist. At the end of the novel, he keeps repeating the same words, which is, what was I expecting? And I found that to be so sad and also just so like real, like what are we all expecting? At the end of the day, like this is all we get. Like it is what it is. This book is literally the like book version of it is what it is, the saying, just like the ultimate acceptance of your life for exactly what it is. If you see somebody's life written on a page and you think, damn, that's depressing, but then you start thinking about people's lives, other people's lives, or your own life, and you're like, well, if someone wrote my life on the page and didn't embellish anything, if somebody read that, would they also feel depressed? Or how would they feel? And that, I feel like most of us, if we really truly wrote about our lives like that or had somebody else write about our lives, most of our life stories would be complicated and maybe mediocre, with their own ups and downs. Like maybe they would be happier than his life because his life is like quite depressing. But then he describes moments like, leaving the house and breathing the spring air and having that be like the best moment of his life. And that was so relatable to me. I found this book deeply relatable on multiple accounts, but especially on how he views these happy moments that are so simple that like he could be going through something horrific, but then he left the house and breathed just the spring air and the wind. And he spent 1 week during Christmas with like the love of his life, and that was like the best week of his life, and he was fine with that. That week was enough for him, and I think that that was just kind of brilliant. I really loved it. I was kind of in the mood for like a little bit of a pick me up, so I read just like a graphic novel about witches. Witchcraft. Honestly, it's mid. Sorry to say. Lindsay Squire and Lisa Salsi. I'm sure they're brilliant people. It's just that I found the art style pretty repetitive, to be honest. Like, it's beautiful. Like, look at this. Like, I mean, it's stunning. Can you even see it? It's stunning. But it's also just like pretty girls making the same face over and over again. The book itself is kind of like a story. It has a story, but it's also about witches, so just like an overview of the history of witches. But it's very like Instagram history of witches. It's not really like real history of witches, like not like that movie The Witch with Anya Taylor-Joy. It's not like that. I still liked it. Like, I enjoyed the art and it had some fun facts. But like, if you are into witch stuff, witchery stuff, and you've done some more research into it and you would like a little bit more depth, I definitely don't recommend this one because it's not really deep at all, and it doesn't cover as much stuff as I would like for it to cover. I then listened to a memoir by Kelly Bishop, who was on Gilmore Girls. She plays the grandmother, Emily Gilmore, and she was also the mother in Dirty Dancing. She's like an actress slash dancer. Like, when in her youth she was a dancer, and she ended up winning a Tony for her performance in A Chorus Line, which is a musical. I was kind of torn on this because a part of me liked the memoir. I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about a memoir because it is somebody's life. You can't just be like, I liked their life or I didn't like their life. That just sounds really weird. So I hesitate to critique it, but I will say that at times I was kind of annoyed with her attitude, for lack of a better word. She sort of tends to say, like, every time something bad happened to her, she'd be like, I saw it coming. Or like, I barged into his office and I told him exactly what I thought of him. I can tell she has a high opinion of herself, which is a good thing, but it was at times like, did you really do that? Did you really see it coming? Overall, I really, really loved it. I loved the fact that she starts her memoir at the age of 30, which I find really refreshing, because I grew up in an era of YouTube books where 21-year-olds were writing memoirs. Do you remember that era? I remember that era because I've bought some of the memoirs. And then I grew up and I was like, these 23-year-olds had no business writing memoirs. To see a memoir by a person into her 80s was really, really nice. She starts it when she's 30 and then she's like, okay, let me catch you up. And then she like has a chapter or like a few, I think it was like a couple of chapters for like up until she's 30. And then the like shit really hits the fan when she's 30. I just find that so awesome because I'm not even 30 yet. And I already feel sometimes so old because I feel like our world is moving really, really fast. To really think about the fact that life is long and we have time, but also to not waste the time we have. Okay, next. Remember Her? I do because I have PTSD from her. The Monk by Matthew Lewis. Again, another class book, so I've had to read these books for class, the gothic books. The Monk is my old friend. I'm gonna refer my previous video. It is disturbing. It follows a guy who descends into sin. It's very engaging. Let's just say that. Some 18th century books are difficult to read and slightly boring to read, But The Monk was not such an 18th century book. I couldn't put it down. I recommend it. I think everybody in the world should read The Monk because it kind of challenges a lot of things. Even if you don't study 18th century literature, you will still be forced to think about things, which I think is good. I really like that about books when books do that. Next I read, or rather listened to, A Crown of Swords by Robert Jordan. I'm making a slow and steady, well, not so steady recently, but slow progress through the Wheel of Time series. I have 4 of the last Wheel of Time books in physical print, and then the rest of them I'm listening to them through audio. I'm enjoying them a lot, especially now toward the middle. Like, I found myself really enjoying specifically book 5 and this one, book 7. Book 6 was a bit of a dud for me. Book 4 as well. Book 3 was really good. Book 2 was really good. And then book 1 was, for me so far, the worst book. But now I'm kind of in an era of my life where I'm like, do I feel like reading another book where every single tavern wench has to be buxom? Do I have that in me to listen to every single woman's breastage be described in gory details? I don't know, I don't think so. I will come back to this. Another thing that's stopping me is the fact that the next book, book 8, is supposed to be the beginning of the slog, which I just really don't. I don't need the slog right now. Like, I need a little bit of action right now. I just don't need the slog. So I'm kind of procrastinating on the Wheel of Time at the moment, but I will come back to it. I'm really enjoying it overall. I love the characters. So far, I think Egwene is my favorite character, along with maybe Nynaeve. Despite the fact that I think the books are slightly sexist, they're also full of women that have their own motivations outside of the male characters. I don't really have a much of a gripe with it outside of the, fantasy book written by a man trope. So like the breasted boobily down the stairs whole situation, I find it manageable. Okay, next. This was in the middle of the semester of my gothic class, so I needed a break. So I read another gothic book, but it was contemporary and it's a queer fantasy. So, not 18th century and not incest is what I was looking for. I read A Dark and Drowning Tide. Beautiful cover. Like, I mean, I can't get enough of this cover. The book itself, though, is mid. It's incredibly mid. Unfortunately, it's the setup for the plot is just way too big for how tiny this book is. I mean, look at how short this book is, and the book sets up as if they're gonna save the entire world. I was convinced it would end up being at least a duology, if not a trilogy, and they wrapped up loose ends so messily and in such a way that made no sense. And I just really didn't like the last half, maybe 40% of the book at all. The first 50 to 60%, I was having a blast. I love the world building. It follows I think 6 characters that are on this quest to like save the magic source of the world. I really am a sucker for a vibe. And this book has a vibe. Like the forest folklore vibe is definitely there. The magic is there. It's just the execution is horrific. I mean, okay, it's not horrific. I'm being dramatic. But it's definitely not as good as I really, really wish it was because the potential is there. It just ends up being so blah. And to be honest with you, the main couple, I was trying so hard to like feel their chemistry and to root for them, but I kind of just found the main protagonist to be really mean. Not for no reason. I understand why she was mean, but at the same time, I was like, maybe like work on yourself. Maybe do that, There's no reason to be mean to this girl that clearly likes you too. So I kind of was annoyed. at the end with her, and also their chemistry was just kind of just not really there. And also there's a scene, I don't know what it is, man, with books these days, but I feel like sometimes books are written as if like they put in a smutty scene in there just for the sake of a smutty scene, and it doesn't really do anything for the story. Sometimes it fits the vibe and sometimes it doesn't fit the vibe, and this was definitely a time where it didn't fit the vibe at all. Like Akatar, for example, the smutty scenes make sense. Like, you lead up to the smutty scenes. This was not a book where you really necessarily led up to a smutty scene. It was just kind of just plopped in there, and it felt really out of place. As I was reading it, I found certain scenes to be sort of written in, and then the rest of the book was written around the scene, if that makes any sense. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. It just made the continuity really blotchy and didn't really make much sense for the plot. This was one of the last books I read for my class, which is Zofloya by Charlotte Dacre. This book is crazy. This book was heavily inspired by The Monk. So it has that vibe of like horror, gothic. It follows a family through a demise after the mother runs away with this guy, and the effect it has on her children. This book is really dark. It's really heavy. If you watched my previous video, I mentioned how the Gothic always talks about our anxieties, and I mentioned the fear of the other, so like immigration, for example. This book talks a lot about that, and I find it so interesting and polarizing. We don't know how to interpret what the author is saying here. From the books we've read for the class, this one left me most confused at the end because I just was not sure about what it's trying to say. The questions of what are we supposed to be scared of really are not answered, because you could really go either way with this one. The main character, Zofloya, does not appear until halfway through the book. Well, I guess he's not even technically the main character, but he is the titular character. Zofloya does not appear until halfway through the book, and he is originally an enslaved man, so a black man, like the Moor. That's why it's called Zofloya or the Moor, because the Moor was one of the words that was used to describe people of multiple kinds of backgrounds, but specifically from North Africa. It's really confusing because at the end, it's like, are we supposed to be scared of the Moor, or are we supposed to be scared of what brought him into this position? So, like, slavery, oppression. It's a very, very good book, though. Very, very good. I really loved it. This was one of my favorite ones. The last book I had to read for the class is one I've actually read before. It was a reread for me. Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey. This is my favorite Austen. So, my old friend, reading this book is like reading any Austen book is like reading a memory, from an old friend. I really love her stuff. This book is unique because it is a gothic novel, but it also challenges a lot of the tropes for the gothic novel. It subverts some of the tropes. Like, the gothic heroine in this novel is just a normal girl. She goes to Bath and she meets like this guy, and he doesn't really like her at first, but she really likes him, so she goes after him, and then he kind of starts liking her back. It's very chill compared to The Monk and Zofloya. Reading it as somebody having that context of the gothic novel was really awesome, because I had that extra understanding of why things were happening the way they were happening, why Jane Austen chose to do certain things, what the callouts were, what the subversions were of the tropes of the gothic novel. Despite it being a parody, it's clear that Jane Austen deeply loves and appreciates the Gothic novel, and this was her having a conversation with it and engaging with it as a fan. And you can see this, like, in multiple conversations. Jane Austen makes it very clear that she prefers people that don't underestimate the novel or the gothic novel in particular. If I had to rank the books that I've read for my class, I would put, I'm not gonna, okay, I would put Jane Austen at the top, but I'm not gonna include Jane Austen right now because it's not technically an 18th century gothic novel, but it's also not a like actual good faith gothic novel. It's kind of a parody. So, and also I've read it before, so I'm just gonna only mention those I've read for the first time this year for the class. So I would say at the top would be The Romance of the Forest, then it would be Zofloya, then it will be The Monk, and then The Castle of Otranto. The reason for that is just because The Romance of the Forest is the most cozy one of them all, and I'm a fan of cozy things. And The Castle of Otranto is Fever Dream, and I was confused. But still very good. All of those books are very good, definitely. So then my gothic class was over, and I found myself craving something that didn't have incest or something dark in it and scary in it. So I entered my rom com era, which did not last very long because I'm not a rom com person in terms of books. I love rom com movies, but not books. What I read was My Roommate is a Vampire. I know, what a title. Kind of self explanatory though. Like, it follows a girl whose roommate ends up being a vampire. I really loved it. For someone that doesn't really like rom coms, maybe I actually do like rom coms because I really liked this book. It was so cute, cheesy as hell, but it was so cute and not cringe. It was kind of slightly cringe at times, but it kind of comes with the territory. And I didn't find it like teeth, like what is it called, like tooth rottingly fluffy. It was just real. Even though she was a vampire, it was just so genuine. I was really rooting for their relationship. They were so sweet. The vampire was not a creep, and the girl was not annoying for the sake of being annoying. It was really cute. I ended up kind of wanting to like live in their apartment because it was described so beautifully. I really liked her job at the end. Let's just say that. Very good time. Then I read Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is my first Emily Henry. And I'm sorry to say, but I don't like Emily Henry. I guess I've only read one, so I shouldn't jump the gun. But people say that this is one of her best ones. And, if this is one of her best ones, Emily Henry is just really, really not for me at all because I found it so annoying. Like, I am not a fan of books where people go to therapy. That sounds so bad. Oh my god. But I just realized after reading this book that I'm not a fan of characters performatively trying to change themselves just because it's cool now to be self aware and to know about your trauma.
Hey, breathe. Sorry, don't say that. Hey, look at me. There you go. I'm gonna give you two options. Okay. We either talk about it now, or we go get ice cream, have a walk, and talk about it after. Ice cream sounds good. Ice cream it is. Okay, so what flavors are you getting? Pistachio for sure, and maybe like a lemon cheesecake? Are you sure about that? Yes, I'm sure. You taste expert. Hey. Huh? You're doing so good. I don't know. Babe, you gotta see me. You're right. You're doing great. Thank you. Let's go get you that ice cream.
I was over it. I'm not gonna lie. The female main character pissed me off because she promised to her sister that she would not work during the vacation, and she ended up working during the vacation. Their chemistry was just, to me, completely non existent. I don't know what that was about. I couldn't wait for the book to end The only good parts were her relationship with her sister. I found that really moving and interesting, and the whole thing about moving on from your life, like your past traumas and moving onwards, with your life. I found that really moving and inspirational and sweet, but that was overshadowed by how annoyed I was. What I found especially irritating was their banter. I love Gilmore Girls, but in this case, I'm gonna use them as a derogatory example. It was like watching Gilmore Girls, where you know how they talk so fast and make so many references that just don't land to me and don't make any sense to me. That's how it was, except I love Gilmore Girls and I hated this book. I was like skimming it. Like their dialogue was I could tell it was supposed to be witty and fun and interesting, but I just found it like I found it gruesome. Definitely one of the least favorite books so far for me. Let's take you back to existentialism really quick again. I read Albert Camus' The Outsider, or sometimes it's called The Stranger. This book was so interesting, especially the ending. I really liked the monologue at the end because it really explained everything to me nicely. Because the entire book, I was kind of just like, I don't understand what the hell he's doing. I'm kind of annoyed by him. I am frustrated by his actions, and I just want this book to be over. And then at the end, something changed where I really started to appreciate this book for what it is. It reminded me a lot of Stoner in that existential way, and I found it compelling because it talks about what is the meaning of life really? Does anything matter? What does it say about us that we assign value to the things that we choose to assign value to? These kind of questions are not answered. The absurdism is really a fascinating philosophy to me. I really enjoy learning about it. Kind of like Stoner has that like point blank narration. Stoner was definitely very inspired by Camus. I can tell. Kind of hard to summarize my thoughts right now on The Outsider because it is so deep and so meaningful to the philosophy of absurdism. But I found it really thought provoking. Then I read Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This one right here. It was really sad. It has 4 different stories which follow 4 different people. I mean, 4 different like groups of people. They're intertwined. It's about a cafe where you can go back in time. It's really sad, really human, very moving. I find it really interesting because it's Japanese, right? So a lot of like cultural things probably lost in translation, but also some of it was really interesting to learn about, like the way Japanese people interact, versus like how this interaction would have occurred if it was in like the West or like Canada or the US or whatever. I found that really cool. Some of it was predictable, I'm not gonna lie. But for example, the story with the husband and the wife, where the husband has like Alzheimer's and she goes back in time to like talk to him and stuff. Really sweet, really sad. Then I read the biggest disappointment of the year so far for me is Lady Chatterley's Lover. Oh my god. It was like reading essays on essays with some smutty scenes in between, but like 1920s smut, so like not like good smut. Very, very weird book. A lot of it was just his musings on like the classism, the sexism, like do women deserve rights? As a 2025 reader, obviously I was trying my best to be like, this was written in 1928. He clearly thought himself a revolutionary for thinking women deserve rights. I understand this was revolutionary probably in 1928, but I also just was really annoyed because I signed up for like historical spicy book and I received like diary entries basically on sexism and classism. Also, I really hated the 2 main characters. Unlikable. Both of them are horrific individuals. So I was just really not interested in anything they were telling me. There's also a scene where they both talk to his penis. Yeah, yeah. Let's move on. Then I read Half a Soul. This book was really sweet. It was like a cozy romantasy kind of. It's about a girl who loses half of her soul to the fairy land. So half of her soul is trapped in the fairy and the rest of her is like in the real world. It's really cute. It's set in the Regency era. But what I found kind of annoying about it is the fact that, in my opinion, it was trying to kind of virtue signal because it was talking about like workhouses. I kind of was a little bit like frustrated because the girl is supposed to have kind of no feelings, but yet she gets really pissed off at her cousin for not having the same like moral compass as her. And I was like, do you really have no feelings? Or you just get to be upset at your cousin for not having the same morals as you? Like, I was just really frustrated with the depiction of somebody that's supposed to have no feelings and no subsequently morals, right? As somebody who is morally good. So I didn't understand why she was depicted as a morally good character when she doesn't have any feelings. I found that a little bit annoying because to me that was screaming the writer is trying to make her main character be a good person. I would rather there be like a logical kind of depiction of a character that, you know, half of her soul is trapped in the fairy. Obviously she's not going to have the same moral compass, she's not going to be the same as the other people, but it's almost as if she is like other people, she's just slightly more quiet. It was really cozy, it was really cute, the fairy was really cute. I'm kind of, you know, a fan of anything with fairy. It was written pretty well. The main guy was really like, some of the stuff did make me like kick my feet, I'm not gonna lie, it did. I was rooting for the main like couple to end up together. I really liked the main guy. I liked his friend as well. I liked her cousin. Like, I liked all the main characters. It was a cute book. Salt and Broom is what I read next. It is a retelling of Jane Eyre. You know how much I love Jane Eyre. So I had a good time with this. It was kind of like if Jane Eyre was a witch and she lived in a cottage. I really like this book. I found the descriptions of Mr. Rochester to be very refreshing because in the original book he's supposed to be like butt ugly, but in this book he's like handsome and he's like spectral, like he's like ghostly almost, which I find really cool. I really liked all of the like nature and the witchiness of this book. Really fun. The plot was a little predictable, I'm not gonna lie. I kind of was hoping for like a big twist at the end, but it was kind of like what she suspected happened did end up happening. Jane Eyre, the original book, is famous for that giant twist at the end, you know, with the wife in the attic. But this book didn't have a wife in the attic. I was really hoping for that though. But it's still really, really fun. Then I read Wuthering Heights. I read it once when I was 16. Kind of flew right over my head. So this time around, you know, as a 27-year-old, I reread this book and I'm so in love. I'm kind of mentally preparing myself. I almost don't want to go and watch that movie when it comes out next year, but I am mentally preparing myself for it. As an adult, I realized that Catherine Earnshaw, she was a problem, but she was not the problem. You know, when I was 16, I had zero empathy for her. I hated her guts. Now, as an adult, I have so much more empathy for her and understanding for what she went through because she was abused almost the same as Heathcliff was, obviously on different grounds because she wasn't racially abused, but she was still abused by her family. I think more than anything, this book is about cycles of violence and generational trauma and family abuse, domestic abuse dynamics that kind of keep repeating if you don't fix yourself. This book really struck a chord. Like, I've unpacked a lot of the things that have happened in my own life, and this was so thought provoking. I feel like reading it when I was 16 and kind of wasn't understanding what was happening around me and stuff. I It went right over my head and I kind of was just like, oh, whatever. I mean, I really liked it, but it wasn't like memorable, to be honest. This was kind of like reading it for the first time, to be honest, because I didn't remember any of the plot. Now, as an adult, this is one of my favorite books of all time now because it is such a realistic depiction of how generational trauma works. She hit the nail on the head with this book. It's so dramatic. It is so vibey. It's also very interesting because the narration is so far removed from us. So it's obviously narrated through a narrator, but then also the narrator is listening to a story being told from Nellie, who was the housekeeper. The thing is happening in the middle, and then it's being observed by Nellie, and then that is being observed by the narrator. So we are very far removed from what's actually going on, which I'm sure there's some sort of analysis about that. I don't know what that is because I haven't looked it up, but I would be really curious to know the significance of that. The last book I read, I finished just yesterday, is Map of the Otherlands. So Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett, book 2 in the Emily Wilde series. And I really liked it. It was so enchanting. It was so sweet, very romantic still, magical. I will say this book was not as much of a page turner for me as the first one was. I took a giant break while I was reading this book. I was also reading Wuthering Heights, and I found myself just constantly reading Wuthering Heights rather than this. So I did take like a 2 week break while reading this, and I think that goes to show how much I wasn't really invested. The break that I took was in the last 100 pages of this book, so clearly I wasn't as invested in the plot as I was with the first book, because with the first one I couldn't put it down. I had to like finish it. I think part of it is the fact that I was brand new to the world in the first one. Now that, I read the first book, I knew what I was going into. So with this one, like stepping foot into like a world that you know, kind of more understanding, more predictable in a way. It wasn't the plot itself was not predictable, but it's like seeing an old friend rather than making a brand new friend that you're like intrigued by. I still really liked it. It did make me want to be her, kind of, Hello. I realized that after I filmed a video, I forgot to mention Call Me by Your Name, which was one of my favorite books of this year. It came at number 2 for me after Stoner. Absolutely beautiful. I loved the themes of memory, and I thought it was very similar to the movie, but the movie kind of took it a bit more graciously on Elio, because book Elio is kind of a psycho. There are some goofy scenes in the book. If you know, you know. The peach scene is not the worst, is all I'm gonna say about that. I felt really devastated by the loss of his love. This experience he had when he was 17, how it shaped the rest of his life. I thought it was really cool and compelling and very deeply human. That's the 6 month wrap up. Damn. 22 books I think I read. I'm very thrilled with this number, to be honest. Okay, bye.